So we are about to start the second session. That is the only obstacle between you and the lunch. But we will have an appetizer because it is about agriculture. It is about agriculture, it is about food industry, it is about value chains in agri-food industry. There is a transition to be made between the last session and this session. As previous session was devoted to the family, and most of, let's say, food and agriculture related activities in demographic perspective are taking place within the family environment, be it at the meal times of the families, be it at the cultivation time in farms and other exploitations. But still, the family model is the dominant one. So this is the first point, which is, I think, important. We are going to speak about the waste and loss in the chain that goes from farm to fork. We are going to take very literally what Pope Francis is saying in many of his speeches, writings. He is speaking about the throwaway culture and the danger that this throwaway culture presents to our society, to the environment, and to our economy. This is a very key point, I think. This throwaway culture in his speeches refers to a wide range of topics, from human beings that are thrown away because useless, to goods and services, and of course running through the environmental problem. Here we are going to focus mainly on the literal dimension of it. We are going to focus on loss and waste in agri-value chain. You are trying to see the panel is excellent. I'm going to introduce each of the speakers immediately. But I think we are trying to look at it from the macro perspective. Professor Gustafsson will have this, and Professor Fu are going to have this view, and probably Professor Sergei too, the macro view. But then going down to the meso dimension, how different organizations are working in these value chains, and with some opening at our own attitudes. I think it is important also to mention that most of us are on the fork side of the value chain. But we should not forget that on the other end of the value chain, we have the majority of world working population that is active in agriculture. So we are on the fork side, but we have to think about those that are farming, that are growing, things that will end up in our meals. The last point, I think, which is important also to mention, that I checked with the memories of the foundation, that is the first time that a session in the long history of the foundation is devoted to this problem of agro-food, let's say, sector, industry, and the cultural implications of it. This is very important, I think, to keep in mind. I will introduce the panelists, the speaker, but first maybe we have to look at the two paintings that are on the wall here. One is Eloquentia, the other one is Justitia. So I think that each of us has somewhere to balance between the two, as the time budget has been slightly eroded by previous activities, and we have been told to finish on time. So we have to shorten a little bit our speech time and floor time, maybe even to allow for one or two questions from the audience. So let's start with the introductory remarks by Professor Daniel Gustafsson, who is a Deputy Director of FAO, with headquarters are not far away. He has a long-term career within this organization. He is a Deputy Director, especially focusing on the sustainable development goals and the activities of member countries. He has a wide experience also of developing countries, as you have spent many years in the developing world. So you will have 20 minutes for your introductory remarks, and then we move to shorter intervention by panel members. So I don't know if you want to go there or here, as you wish.
I'll go for it. Okay. I'll go for it. Okay. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure for me to lead off. I won't take 20 minutes, I hope. I'm not planning on taking 20 minutes in any case, so to give more time, in fact, for the other speakers who I know have really outstanding experience and more detailed examples of how these concepts apply in practice. But let me start out by saying how pleased I am actually to kick off this session and to begin the discussion around the larger themes of policies and actions in the new age, looking at the case of agriculture, food, and environment. And I was particularly attracted not only by the overall program, but by the opening session theme of going back to look at rerum novarum and thinking, or centesimus annus also as the 100-year later encyclical, of what would be the new things for us. What is it that we think are the big issues of the age? And partly because I work at a food and agriculture organization. But I think beyond that, I think really the issues that confront us, some of the highest priority issues of the world and global society relate to hunger, inequality, food, distribution, and its relationship to society and the environment. And these really are our big issues. And the food system is an enormous part of this, both in terms of the linkage between hunger and poverty and the linkage between consumer behavior, producers, impact on the environment, and in particular, impact on climate change and what that will bring. Where we see this, I think, most clearly articulated is also, I think, as a marker for really the top issues of our present time in the encyclical Laudato Si, and its really magisterial presentation of the interconnectedness of society, environment, economics, with a very strong element of an interest in integrating these elements, including the food system. We know that most of the world's poor are rural. Most of those people depend on agriculture either as producers or as agricultural laborers. They're the most vulnerable. They have the least access to inputs. They're the highest proportions of hungry, and they are likewise the most vulnerable to climate change. And the call in Laudato Si for really this ecological conversion, to see how things are connected, to appreciate the connection between the planet, our common home, and development, economics, and the environment, how all of those are connected, is in fact the key message, particularly focusing on the poorest and the most vulnerable. Of course, these themes are, I think, probably expressed better nowhere else, but not only, of course, in the encyclical, but the same themes reflected very strongly in Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 of them adopted also in 2015 by all the countries of United Nations, not just the developed or the developing countries, but all the countries, with specific targets and a specific, let's say, philosophy on how things are connected between the main sustainability goals along the economic dimension, the social dimension, and the environmental dimension. So this session then, I think, is just a wonderful opportunity to look at these connections and see how our actions, both as individuals, as communities, as societies, as countries, relate to these themes working towards a sustainable food chain or a sustainable food system, and working away against the throwaway society that we discussed. The call to action in this sense, I think, will be reflected. I know will be reflected in the examples of those that follow me. So I won't go into too many of those, but I think it may be helpful to start out with some context and broader ideas and some definitions. First of all, with regard to the food chain or the value chain, we think of that really in terms of the production and value addition that goes into food, let's say between farm to fork. I've always been a bit reluctant to use farm to fork since so much of the world doesn't use forks, right? I think probably a larger percentage of the world eats with their hands, in fact, but between hands and chopsticks, I think it outweighs forks. But of course, we do talk about farm to fork because it has a nice ring to it. But in any case, that would be sort of the value chain. In addition to that, we tend to think of more a sense of the food system, which would be the value chain, but on top of that, the overall environment, the institutions, the policies, the distribution, processing, marketing, consumption, and whether or not it is healthy, is it abundant, is it continuous, is it seasonal, and so on. And in both cases, a sustainable food chain or a sustainable food system should be profitable in the economic sense. It should have broad-based benefits for everyone in terms of kind of society sustainability, and it should be either have a positive or at worst a neutral impact on the environment. So a sustainable food system, sustainable value chain would be one food chain where we want to have safe, healthy food for everyone now, and we don't want to compromise the basis for future generations to have the same economic, social, and environmental benefits from the system. Okay, so within this context, then, naturally, wasting food is a natural, right? This comes up a lot, and it is, in fact, a symptom, I think, of the size of the food loss and waste, a symptom of the bigger problems. So it is, in fact, food loss and waste, one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It's the sustainable goal number 12 is on sustainable production and consumption, and there is a target, in fact, 12.3, to reduce the amount of food wasted, the edible food wasted, in half by 2030, and also there's a piece that would reduce, but it doesn't give a quantity of the amount of food loss. So this can be a bit confusing. We tend to think of food lost as edible parts of food that is produced but lost in the early stages of the food chain, so mainly at the farm level or before it gets to the first processing. Food waste, on the other hand, is what we think of more at the latter end of the food chain, either in processing or in the consumer and retail and consumer end. When we look at the data on this, and I'm sure others will refer to this too, the number that is often cited is from, in fact, an FAO study from 2011. About 1/3 of all food is either lost or wasted. This is a somewhat controversial number because it's so difficult to measure, but it's interesting, I think, the main point. In developing countries, most of that is food loss. Most of that happens at the farm level and just beyond, because of lack of storage, lack of cold storage facilities, lack of good roads, lack of the ability of poor farmers to small farmers to have access to markets and facilities and other things that leads to a real high level of food loss that has an impact on their incomes and their diets and other things, and I'll get back to that in a minute. When we look at the food wastage side, that is really the main issue for developed countries, developed economies, where either at the retail, consumer, or particularly at those two ends, a lot of food is thrown away. In both cases, regardless of which level of income your country is in, the study indicates that it's still about 1/3 either lost or wasted. More so in Europe, for example, it's much higher. The proportion of waste is much higher than loss. In most African countries, as I mentioned, most of it is lost. Not very much of it at all is wasted. And this, of course, has lots of implications. And the Holy Father, in his 2013 address on World Food Day, is the one that we often see cited, that exhorting us not to waste food, which would be like as if it were stolen from the table of the poor and hungry, in fact. Then, in addition to that, and we'll get there would be examples from the other speakers and so on, but in addition to that, the other key point on this is the impact on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And in particular, from the food wastage side, if you think of all the energy, all the transportation, all the inputs that go into food that then is not eaten but wasted, it has a tremendous impact on either underutilized resources that could be used otherwise, or the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, which is a staggering amount. We think about somewhere between 6 and 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions comes from food loss and waste. It is, for let's say kilo for kilo, about 8 times greater greenhouse gas emissions from food waste than from food loss, which makes sense given all the complex steps in the food chain before it is wasted. But it is a staggering amount, somewhere around 1.6 billion tons of food, the equivalent of 1.4 billion hectares of land that would go into that, and around 300 million barrels of oil a year that go into the production of that food that is thrown away. So it is, in fact, an immense amount that is problematic. This we can see. So the question then is why, given this waste, why is it so high? I mean, this seems to not make any sense in any measure. So why is it? And I think there we have to look at two main aspects. The first one, what economists talk about, is externalities, that a lot of the real cost to society is not reflected in the price. So the damage to the environment and other things is not actually included in the price of what we pay for the food that we throw away, among other externalities that you don't actually see. If those costs could be somehow incorporated into the price that we actually pay, then we would no doubt make other decisions and we would see things. But it is, one part is the sort of the externalities of how the markets work. And the other one, and this I think we will see again or listen to from the speakers, is on incentives. The incentives for consumers, retailers, and others on the waste side don't necessarily work in favor of not wasting food. They often work in favor of wasting food. And this affects all of us. I was in Japan recently, and they, of course, Japanese, very high importance on food quality, food safety, and food appearance, leading to often extremely short shelf life, often in terms of hours. 4 hours, and then it goes, and so on. And there are other. Those are actually quite good qualities. We like safe food, we like good appearance, and so on. But the incentives tend to run in a different direction. Similarly, supermarkets know that consumers like to see things that have a long shelf life. The sell-by date in fact, things tend to not be purchased if the sell-by date less than 1/4 of that remains. So you're not going to buy something if you've only got a few days left. If it's more than a quarter left, it's more than 3/4 gone, consumers don't like it. And this seems to make sense to consumers. It doesn't make sense for food waste. The other big issue I think that we tend to forget is the convenience and the time constraints on everyone, and especially on women. So rather than buy too much, buying too much is preferable in terms of time than buying too little and having to go back and buy more. Those are just a few examples of how things work, but there is a complicated issue of incentives that we have to figure out how to make it make more sense for us as consumers or as producers or as marketers or restaurant owners or supermarkets to reduce waste in a way that actually achieves these societal objectives. Okay, so that's sort of the bigger background. Let's look at some of the issues, some of the questions that were posed to the panel. And the first one, I think, looks at the impact of food loss and waste on hunger. And what's that connection? And here I think we see a number of very interesting things that I'm sure the panelists will pick up on. We're in a bad way. We have 815 million people who are hungry, chronically undernourished. That number had been going down for quite a while. It is now going up again. So the linkage, however, between food waste in exporting countries, food exporting countries, and the increase in hunger in countries or in families with food deficit is not so clear. There's so many complex issues that go into that that we need to unpack those in a way that is much more complicated. Nevertheless, there are direct consequences. For one thing, food loss and waste raises the price of food in developing countries. Consumers often spend 50% of their income on food. The greenhouse gas emissions from food waste is a huge impact. It makes achieving the Sustainable Development Goals more difficult, and it increases poverty and other things. So looking at those connections is critical, although the actual directional link is sometimes difficult to see. Nevertheless, and here I would go back to Laudato Si, which, as I say, I think is just a wonderful presentation of how things are, an analysis of how things are connected. And if everything is connected, if what we do, the way we treat each other, the way we consume, the way that we treat the planet, the way that we work in society and with each other, if all of that is in fact connected, then clearly, and we believe it is, then clearly food waste is not helpful, and it will be connected to other decisions, other policies, other behaviors that will be leading to these larger problems. So I think I will end here. There are other examples that'll come up on how we might look at then trade, or we might look at the role of technology and productivity and so on, but I think within this context, why food loss and waste is so high, where it's lost, where it's wasted, what are the incentives, what can we do about it within this larger context of an integral ecology that Pope Francis has so eloquently expressed in Laudato Si, I think is a really wonderful framework for us to look at this issue within the larger context of this very important meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for providing this broad background, also at hinting of some of the points that the further discussion could take on, and keeping it within the time limits, which was really a challenge. Let us turn now to Professor Fu. You have his handout that has been circulated during the break. He is Dean and Professor and Dean of MBA and Education Center of China Agricultural University. He is one of the top specialists in the field of agriculture and food supply chains in China. So thank you very much for being with us. And the floor is yours for about 10, 12 minutes maximum.
So I'd like to stand to make a speech. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to be here to talk about something about Chinese food supply chains. So you know that China is the biggest developing country in the world with a huge population, 1.3 billion peoples. So the food security is a great challenge to Chinese government and Chinese peoples. So Mr. Brown wrote the book, Who Will Feed China? So in the early 1990s. So at that time, the people living in extreme poverty in China is over 60%. But now, until last year, the number down to 4%. So I think that China and the Chinese people and the Chinese government make a great success to the poverty reductions. So, looks like, can I move this slide?
The remote control for please, the remote control for the slide.
Where is the slide? Oh, here. Hey, thank you. So I will talk about the food waste in China, and then the influence of the consumption upgrade on food supply chain, and lastly, I'll give you an example of the cooperation between China and Europe. Really hard to. Oh, sorry. So, in China, the food waste is also very serious. Totally 50 million tons each year. And the waste on the table is about 18 million tons each year. And the waste on the supply and the value chain is 35 million tons of grains. So there is interesting. So you can see this slide, that China, the waste on the consumption close to the developed countries, close to Japan and Korea. So both in consumption, the waste in the consumption and the waste in the supply chain both are serious in China. So China is a developing country. Why the main reason of the food waste in the table waste? What's the reason? The main reason is the culture. Because if you come to China as a friend, the Chinese people will serve you the best food and the best drink. And if you don't drink well or almost drank, he will think lose face. So next time we would come to China, so the Chinese people will serve you a lot of food to get face. So this is one of the main reasons of the culture. Why? But the people, the ordinary people in China, their lifestyle at home is thrifty. It's thrifty. So Chinese people are working very hard. They work, they do spend money, but they spend money for friends. So this is Chinese. So, and now that the things are getting better, I think the things are getting better. The people are changing their behaviors, and I think the waste in the consumption is less important than the waste in the supply chain. Why? Because the people are easy to change their behaviors, but the supply chain takes time. So next, I will talk about the main trend of consumption upgrade in China. Now the Chinese are becoming a conscious consumer. What is conscious? Conscious means in the stage of a make a living, we focus on the quantity instead of quality. We focus on the low price and the brand. So we focus on face. But now their consuming behaviors have greatly changed. So they began to they have a new lifestyle. The lifestyle is to have a happy life and a healthy life and premier life. And this is a change. They spend more money. They want to spend more money on the products of the high quality and the product of brand. And they also want to pay more for the products of the environmental friendly and the food of the social welfare. So this is, I think, the great changes. There is, I think, the consumption upgrade supported by the huge amount of middle classes in China. The Chinese people are getting richer and they get more money, so they are becoming conscious. But in China, there is a problem. The problem is, so some of their agriculture products, they are oversupplies. The oversupplies. But the strange thing is that the Chinese imported foods from overseas, especially from developed country, from Europe and from America, from Japan, Korea, it increased. Is the time? Okay, yeah. So that is because they in China, so the consumption upgrade, but the supply don't follow up and catch the step of the upgrade of consumptions. So in China, we are changing of our developing road to a new one. So to our efficient supply, reducing efficient supplies, improving supply qualities, and to have our sustainable, healthy, and environmental friendly ways. So this is China are changing their developing ways. So lastly, I will talk about the corruption between one of the projects between the Europe and China. So this is about a pork industry project. Mr. Bavolochi, I think Mr. Bavolochi is an old man with a young heart, with a great ambitions. So he set up the joint venture in China. So to introduce the European models and experience and technologies into China. So now China need high quality food, and we are changing our ways of developing. We need the green revolutions. But now the Europe has the experience. You have the experience and knowledge and the technologies, and this is what Chinese need. So this project, I used to be the CEO of the Western group. So this project is supported by the government, and this project. So in the southeastern China, in the poor area, so it is a national level project. So I think this project will be a good example for the European country to introduce the high quality experience and models into China. And I think there is a great potential in China because China has a huge market, and the market is changing, and China is changing their developing way. So welcome to China. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fu, for showing the interaction between culture and food consumption, food production, and the adjustment on the food production that is required today by the disequilibrium that you have mentioned, and also the reorientation of industrial policy in China. Thank you very much, and it prepares also some elements for discussion. Now let me turn to Donald Moore, who is an active actor of the value chain because he is the executive director of the Global Dairy Platform in Chicago, which is a cooperation agreement between large dairy producers in the US and to some extent also abroad. It has a worldwide ambition, so he's confronted with the challenges on both ends of the value chain daily. So please take the floor and stay with us for 12 minutes of your expose and then for the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And just to give you a little bit about background about the organizations, plural, that I'm going to be representing today. As our moderator talked about the Global Dairy Platform, we have members in 36 countries around the world. So while I sport my American accent today, I spend most of my time outside the United States rather than inside the United States. And we have members right across the world, from China to South Africa, Kenya, right across Europe, the US, Oceania, and parts of Asia as well, other parts of Asia as well. The other organizations that I'm going to represent today is I also chair a group called the International Agri-Food Network, which is a group of 14 to 15 industry associations, global industry associations who formed together, and we represent the agri-food business in discussions with FAO, so with Dan Gustafson's groups. I also chair the private sector mechanism, so any private sector company who wishes to engage with the World Committee on Food Security does so through a group called the Private Sector Mechanism. And I'm going to be talking about some of the private sector initiatives today, as well as some of the farm side initiatives. And so I'm going to put my hand up and say I might be unique on this panel because I think I'm the only person on the panel actually representing the farmers. And so someone was talking farm to fork, and then somebody made the comment that maybe it's not fork, so perhaps we should talk farm to mouth. And I'm on the farm side of that equation in my discussions today. I'd just like to pick up a couple of points that Daniel Gustafson made in his presentation, and he talked about the role of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular Goal 12, which is really what we're focusing on here today. And in Goal 12, he talked about some of the specific targets in there. By 2030, halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels, and reduce food losses along the production and supply chain, including post-harvest losses. And I think FAO deserve credit for ensuring that this very important target has been inserted into the Sustainable Development Goals. From a private sector perspective, we see the SDGs as particularly important because they create a roadmap against which we in the private sector can measure our own progress. And in particular, we're delighted to see the inclusion of goal number 17 on partnerships, because it really gives the private sector and industry more broadly an opportunity to engage in discussions with the United Nations. Just a little bit about the global dairy sector. There are 133 million dairy farms in the world. There are 600 million people living on those dairy farms around the world. And then if you take into account families whose livelihoods depend upon dairy upstream and downstream from the farm itself, you find another 400 million people whose livelihoods depend upon the dairy sector. The dairy sector is responsible for the livelihoods of 1 billion people in the world. If you could put them all together, that would be the third largest country in the world. So the dairy sector is very large, it is very diverse. Those of us from developed countries probably think of the dairy sector in terms of farms of 80 or 200 or 1,000 cows. The average dairy farm in the world is 1.9 cows. I'm not quite sure what 0.9 of a cow looks like, but I'm sure I'll see it when I come across it. I'll recognize it. The dairy sector also provides 240 million full-time jobs, 80 million of which are employed by women. Women also lead 37 million of the dairy farms in the world. So dairy is a very important vehicle globally, not just from a nutrition perspective, not just from a socio-economic perspective, but also from a gender equality perspective. One of the challenges we have in the dairy sector is that our product has a very short shelf life. So if you consider, milk coming from a cow, it really has only a few hours where you have to process that milk before it becomes spoiled. And so a lot of the dairy sector around the world is formed around cooperatives that collect milk and band together to process that milk in different parts of the supply chain. I'm very pleased to see one of our colleagues on the panel from China, because China has really advanced some technology in the area of extended shelf life products. And so in China today, you can buy extended shelf life yogurt products where they don't have to be refrigerated, they're ambient. Now, the technology behind that is stunning, because yogurt still has to have a live culture. It has to have a live culture in order for the bacteria to operate. And in China, they have created technology that allow them to produce ambient, shelf-stable yogurt with, I think, about a 6-month shelf life on it. So technologies like that are allowing us to bring dairy products to a much broader range of people around the world, people who have not necessarily got access to cold supply chain. If I just move on, I want to talk a little now about industry more generally, and some of the industry leaders and what they are doing in the area of food loss and waste. And I want to start by talking about the challenges of food safety. Without food safety, you start with a very large loss at the bottom of the pyramid. In fact, food contamination in Africa accounts for about 25% of the food produced is contaminated. And Mars Corporation, a leading corporation, has developed a very strong food safety program. They have a large food safety center that they opened in 2015 in China. The Food Safety Center, Global Food Safety Center, is a pre-competitive initiative that they invite their competitors into to share their knowledge and their technology. And in particular, they're looking at the challenges around aflatoxin contamination in the basic food supply chain. So if we can stop contamination at the basic level in the food supply chain in Africa, we end up with more food available for consumers. In terms of other organizations and what they're doing in the space, Nestle is a member of a group called Champions 12.3, which focuses on Goal 12 and the sub-goal of 3, an initiative led by the United Nations to accelerate progress towards halving food waste by 2030. And it set an objective to achieve zero waste disposal at all of their sites, and to make date labels understandable for consumers. Now, Daniel Gustafsson mentioned in his presentation sell-by dates. I don't know how many of you are confused by dates as much as I am, but sell-by, use-by, best-by, I have to tell you the analysis that we've done is that consumers are totally confused and that they simply throw out when any one of those dates is achieved. In my personal refrigerator at home, you will find cheese that is 8 months past its sell-by date. It actually tastes better. It's still perfectly, suitable for consumption. Moving on a little bit, because I'm getting the time nod here, I wanted to talk about some innovations, smaller companies and extremely high levels of innovation that are going on in the food loss and waste space. At the private sector mechanisms engagement with the Committee on World Food Security in October last year, we brought a company along called Appeal Sciences. And Appeal Sciences have developed a technology they call EdiPeel. EdiPeel is a wash that they put fruit and vegetables through, and this extends the shelf life and keeps that fruit and vegetable in its fresh picked state for a very long time period. The technology uses natural elements that are extracted from citrus and other fruits and seeds, and it simply coats the fruit. It is entirely non-toxic and edible. You wouldn't even know it was there, but you end up with long shelf life fruit and vegetables. They're bringing that technology to the market later this year. The last thing I would want to mention, and I think this will fit into one of our other panelists' talks, is the advent of some of the smartphone technology that's out there. Two areas of technology. One, providing advice to consumers about discounted goods that are being made available because they're starting to get towards the end of their shelf life. And there's an application called Too Good To Go, which is now available in over 8 European countries, and with a large group of consumers following that. Since they launched the application, over 3 million people have downloaded it, and somewhere in excess of 2.5 million meals a year are being saved as a result of that technology. There are also redistribution platforms becoming more and more common, and I will leave one of my other colleagues on the panel to talk about that. But in the context of redistribution of food, I did want to mention that at the Private Sector Mechanisms high-level dinner in October last year here in Rome, we partnered with an organization which was called Equivento. Equivento, my apologies for the mispronunciation, but Equivento is a Rome-based non-profit organization that collects excess food from banquets and functions such as we're having here and redistributes it to shelters and the homeless people. So I would recommend examples like that. So maybe, as you can see from my short intervention, the private sector is heavily involved in initiatives to extend shelf life, to improve the basic processing, and to eliminate waste and loss in the food system. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for the content, but also to sticking to the time schedule. And now I turn to Andreas Sergei, who is a professor at University of Trento. He is professor of comparative agriculture policy, but also of circular economy. He is not only a theoretician, but is very much a practitioner. He has created a number of initiatives in the region of Trento, and I think he will be balancing between the macro perspective and the meso perspective. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Foundation for giving me this opportunity, and I'll take the opportunity to give my speech in Italian since you have a translation, so I can stick in my 10 minutes. Poiché alcuni interventi hanno già inquadrato il tema perdite, spreco, vado direttamente al punto che volevo trattare oggi, senza particolari introduzioni. La frase che è riportata nel titolo della nostra sessione è cibo, sostenibilità, responsabilità contro la cultura dell'usa e getta, partendo peraltro dall'enciclica di Papa Francesco, la Laudato Si. Usa e getta, nella seconda parte getta è lo spreco alimentare. Il cibo non viene usato, viene gettato via ancora buono. È vero che nella comunità internazionale, lo dico per la mia presenza all'Università di Bologna, in tutti i progetti europei che stanno cercando di definire cos'è lo spreco, non c'è accordo su questo, ma la definizione della FAO è chiarissima: perdite a monte nella filiera agroalimentare, questione di tecnologia, di organizzazione, spreco a valle, comportamento, ed è qui che io voglio stare oggi. E lo stiamo analizzando sotto due prospettive. La parte, diciamo, dello spreco che sta soprattutto a casa nostra, nella grande distribuzione e in altri anelli della filiera, diciamo, a valle della produzione. E cioè noi cerchiamo di capire come le due azioni concrete che portano al contrasto di questa cultura, ma dell'azione stessa del sprecare degli alimenti ancora buoni, ancora consumabili, sta in due, diciamo, azioni, due verbi. Da un lato il recupero, dall'altro la prevenzione. Mi soffermo molto velocemente su entrambi perché ci aiutano a capire la cultura che serve per contrastare questo fenomeno che abbiamo visto a livello globale è importante, se non altro per quel dato che la FAO ci ricorda continuamente: 1/3 di ciò che si produce non arriva alle nostre tavole, si perde o si spreca lungo la filiera agroalimentare. Il recupero è un'azione fondamentale. Tutto ciò che è ancora buono e può finire, diciamo, nello stomaco di chi ha bisogno diventa un'azione, diciamo, che all'interno dell'economia, lo spreco, la perdita, diciamo, è un fallimento dell'economia. Le imprese non producono per sprecare, c'è qualcosa che non funziona in questo sistema, lo dobbiamo rendere più efficiente. E tuttavia, quando questa eccedenza c'è, anche per ragioni fisiologiche, pensate ai vari passaggi della catena, si può recuperare, mettendo in relazione, e la relazione è un valore, un potenziale donatore, chi ha l'eccedenza, e un potenziale beneficiario, un'impresa da una parte, un ente no profit dall'altra, due mondi apparentemente contrari e antitetici che si raggiungono nella finalità del recupero, e da una parte eviti l'eccedenza, eviti il costo dello smaltimento di quel prodotto che altrimenti sarebbe un rifiuto, e dall'altra riempi un vuoto. Ma ciò che rimane, e l'ho visto attivando ormai 20 anni fa, sembra ieri, questa iniziativa dell'Università di Bologna che si chiama Last Minute Market, mercato dell'ultimo minuto, dove ci siamo posti questo problema: come concretamente recuperare a fini solidali questa eccedenza. Capisci che l'economia del dono non è un ossimoro, come io pensavo, da economista applicato, o è economia o è gratis. No, è un valore di relazione che mette assieme due mondi, in realtà due persone, uno scambio di anime, come dicono gli antropologi, ed è molto potente perché capisci che il mercato, valore di scambio, valore d'uso, ha il suo antidoto alla riparazione di questo fallimento, ciò che rimane è il valore di relazione fra due persone che si scambiano un bene eccedente. È molto potente, molto, è pieno di organizzazioni a livello mondiale che lo fanno. Noi da studiosi abbiamo cercato di capire come renderlo sostenibile, ed è qui il secondo passaggio, perché se non ti domandi perché sprechi e dove sprechi, forse non fai un buon lavoro, perché non nutriremo gli affamati soltanto recuperando, e si riesce a recuperare nonostante tutto una minima parte di ciò che si getta via. E passa, diciamo, in azione il secondo verbo, ed entriamo davvero qui nei nostri comportamenti, anche quelli personali, e la disciplina che stiamo usando è per l'appunto nei nostri studi l'economia comportamentale. Allora abbiamo messo in piedi, innanzitutto per capire chi spreca cosa e dove, un osservatorio che abbiamo chiamato Waste Watcher, una sorta di sentinella dello spreco, per analizzare i nostri comportamenti, perché nel mondo, in realtà, non soltanto in Italia, e poi mi riferisco in questo caso ai paesi industrializzati, la quota più rilevante di ciò che si getta via sta a casa nostra, è lo spreco domestico, e lì non lo puoi recuperare, non è possibile. E quindi abbiamo iniziato a ragionare, a capire come intervenire a monte. Il miglior spreco è quello che non fai, e quindi fare prevenzione. E la prevenzione come la fai? Attraverso l'educazione alimentare. È incredibile a dirsi, nel paese, diremo così, nel bel paese dove la cultura gastronomica è uno dei fari, noi siamo maleducati, quindi mi riferisco al nostro paese dal punto di vista alimentare. Non vi sto a citare i dati, ma non voglio diciamo farne un caso. I dati dello spreco domestico in Italia, siamo poi in media rispetto agli altri paesi europei, però è un dato molto rilevante. Se il valore economico di ciò che gettiamo via a casa nostra vale circa l'1% del nostro prodotto interno lordo, solo il valore economico, prezzo medio. Poi pensate, come ha fatto la FAO molto bene, al costo nascosto. Stiamo usando delle risorse naturali limitate che gettiamo via, e tutto il ragionamento che ha fatto benissimo il vice direttore della FAO prima. Allora noi stiamo insistendo su questo punto. Dovremmo inserire davvero nelle nostre scuole a partire dalle primarie, ma forse anche prima, l'educazione alimentare, come una parte importante della nostra educazione civica o la cittadinanza. Noi abbiamo perso il valore del cibo e tutti i lavori che abbiamo fatto lo testimoniano. Allora dobbiamo, ed è qui la proposta, provare a cambiare visione, e mi riallaccio a questo documento straordinario che l'ha Laudato Si, la faccio leggere ai miei studenti e faccio una lettura laica. Sostituisco molto semplicemente il termine creato a natura, risorse naturali, funziona perfettamente. È un documento molto potente anche dal punto di vista scientifico e in qualche modo corrobora una visione che stiamo cercando di portare avanti da molto tempo, quando il Papa si riferisce all'ecologia integrale. Proviamo a ribaltare, adesso io metto le mie due eco sulle quali sono un po' più preparato, l'economia e l'ecologia. Proviamo a ribaltare la visione della nostra società. Sono due case, la nostra piccola casa, l'economia, importante, c'è la nostra famiglia, i nostri consumi, tante case si moltiplica, e un paese. E c'è una casa più grande, l'ecologia, la radice è la stessa, il COS, ed è la casa delle risorse naturali, l'ambiente, la terra, l'acqua, l'energia. Ecco, riusciamo a liberare questa visione, perché anche negli economisti, fra virgolette, più avanzati, io sono un economista applicato, i cosiddetti economisti ecologici, in realtà mettono al centro l'economia, è quello il soggetto, ma non va bene, non ci sta. Vogliamo guardare la nostra società in avanti che si fondi sull'ecologia economica? L'economia è un capitolo, è un paragrafo, è un aggettivo importante, molto. Però così lo contestualizziamo. Se stiamo dentro la casa più grande, la rispettiamo, questa casa comune, ne rispettiamo i limiti. E allora da lì il passaggio all'ecologia integrale, con tutte le altre aggettivazioni, a una visione legata alla sostenibilità, alla durata nel tempo, l'armonia, alla circolarità dell'economia, rientrano perfettamente in questa visione. L'ho chiamata, e chiudo davvero, ho 35 secondi, perché mi voglio agganciare al tema generale che avete trattato qui, nuove politiche per stili di vita. Ecco, allora noi forse abbiamo un cibo alto e un cibo basso spazzatura, non potremmo arrivare a un cibo medio che nutre per tutti, di qualità sufficiente? E se cibo lo associamo alla dieta, ma dieta cos'è? È stile di vita, perché se no lo interpretiamo come restrizione calorica, non va bene così, condotta. Allora possiamo pensare a una sorta di neologismo, non so come definirlo, che ho coniato, avere uno stile di vita medio, uno stile medio che non sia troppo alto e troppo basso, giusto, equilibrato. Ecco, questa è la nostra sfida. Grazie per avermi ascoltato.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and you see how these different interventions from different panel members complement each other and provide us with a broader picture. Now let's turn to Justin Byam Shaw, who is a media entrepreneur, who is chairing the Evening Standard and the Independent in the UK, but he came here not as a media entrepreneur, but as a food entrepreneur. He is going to present us something which is very close to your last sentences in terms of the Felix project that is working already in London.
Thank you.
Take the floor, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am your last obstacle to lunch, so I will be as quick as I can. One of the problems of going last is that you find you have a little less time, and also you find that the speakers who spoke before you have said some of the things you wanted to say. But I would like to illustrate some of the things that these esteemed panelists have said before me by asking you to imagine two things. Imagine a landmass the size of China and give it over entirely to food production. Then harvest that food production, crops, fruit, vegetable, livestock, dairy, and then burn it. Put it in a hole in the ground or spread it on crops. That's what we do globally every year. Now I want you to imagine the world as this room. There are rich and poor in here, and we all have a pile of food in front of us. The poor quickly can eat their food, but we rich have more food than we need. We have a pile that we are soon sated by, and it's left in front of us. What happens then? Well, it's left to rot in front of us. We don't hand it out, or very little of it. We just leave it to rot. How can it be that in a country as rich as mine, the United Kingdom, there are 2 million people who are struggling to feed themselves and their families, while at the same time our food industry has a surplus of about 700,000 tons of edible food. Now just 93% of this food is spread on crops, is buried in a hole in the ground, or is burnt. Just 7% reaches charity, reaches the people who need it most. It's this mismatch between supply, the plentiful food, and demand, the people who need it, that attracted me as an entrepreneur to start the Felix Project. It was obvious to me that there was more than enough food to go around. It just wasn't reaching the right people. What we do at the Felix Project is very simple. We collect daily from about 170 supermarkets and wholesalers and food manufacturers, and we deliver that food weekly to about 180 frontline charities. Many of these charities are on the breadline themselves, so you can imagine what a difference it makes that we can cut completely or reduce their food bills. We ask them to prepare hot meals for the people they serve, and mainly the homeless, but also the elderly and others struggling to get by, and they also give food parcels. Our focus is on high quality, fresh food. Now that makes us a little bit different to food banks in the United Kingdom, where the model is that members of the public donate food, and so this food is often in packets or in tins and of lower nutritional quality than we can provide. There's really no reason why people with very little food should not be able to eat high quality, high nutrition food. There's plenty of it to go around. I was recently very struck by a statistic that 70,000 London school children go to school every day hungry, that is without breakfast. So we've recently started to deliver to schools, primary schools, in some of the poorest areas of London as well, and we hope to get to 120 by the end of the next year. Our growth, and it's not very modest of me to say this, has been phenomenal. We now deliver about 3 tons of food a day, and I think that will have doubled by the end of this year. We plan to have covered the entire of London by 2020. Why has that happened? Well, I think Londoners have responded very generously to the obvious common sense of what we're doing, both with their money and their time. We couldn't do what we do without our volunteer network. We already have 300 regular volunteers. If any of you are ever in London, I would urge you to come to the Refettorio Felix, which is a community kitchen we started last year to showcase what we do. We started this with the absolutely visionary Italian chef Massimo Bottura, who you may have heard started a soup kitchen in Rio with food surplus. What we do is we take high quality surplus food and high quality volunteer chefs, Michelin starred chefs including Massimo, and we serve lunch every day to 80 to 100 homeless people. We think this is a model that can be adopted all around the world with surplus food and volunteer chefs. I would ask you to imagine one last thing, and then I'm finished. I believe food poverty in Europe, at least, is entirely solvable. There is clearly more than enough food to go around. But I ask you to imagine one more thing. Every Sunday I volunteer and I collect a van load of food from Whole Foods Market in West London. I then drive that to about 4 charities, including 2 Catholic churches. Now those 2 Catholic churches at the moment are consumers, are beneficiaries of the Felix Project, not contributors. Now I know you'll have heard from Pascal earlier, and I know what wonderful work the church does in London. But imagine if we could mobilize your extraordinary volunteer resource in London and in cities around the world. We know that the food is there for free. I believe that we would solve entirely food poverty in London and in many cities around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We started with macro, we ended with a real side activity, and thank you very much for providing this spectrum also of questions and for our reflection. If I may, as we have short time that is left, I would ask all the panelists to answer one simple question, which is of course not so simple. The foundation, one of the missions of the foundation is the promotion of Christian Catholic social teaching. There are a number of principles starting from solidarity, subsidiarity, universal destination of goods, preference for the poor, and so on and so on. So in light of these teachings, what would be the 2 key actions for each of you that should be taken immediately in order to solve, at least to address the waste problem, well, ignoring maybe the other that are linked to it, but just focusing on the theme of our session, which is waste and loss. What are the 2 top priorities for each of you? Maybe we start in the order of the sequence of the speakers. So, Mr. Gustafsson.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, that's a tall question, but I think one has to be what Justin just described, because it is something that we can all contribute to, and it is in fact applicable to all societies, not just rich countries or poor countries, but the recycling of food. So you see the connection immediate between those who don't have food and surplus food within the society, rather than looking at it in terms globally. Otherwise, I think in terms of, let's say, a more macro view, I would highlight, I think, the improvements in employment creation within the food chain that simultaneously reduce loss and create more low-level jobs linking rural sector and small cities and towns.
Thank you. Professor Fu?
I think that the biggest food waste is if the company produce the product and food the consumer don't want to eat. So this is the biggest food waste. And for example, in China, the pork industry is huge. So we have, each year we produce 700 million pigs each year. But the people, this is ordinary products. The people, their consumption upgrade, they need high quality products. But that the businessmen, they compete each other, and they produce the products the consumer do not want. So this is the biggest waste. I think this is the significant importance for TWB to introduce the European model into China to produce high quality products. And then another big waste is environmental waste. In China, we produce 700 million pigs, but the cost is very high. So the water is polluted and the environment getting worse and worse. So I think if we use the green way to develop the industry, that's the best. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a macro advice. Thank you very much. Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Oh, am I on? I am on, thank you. 2 things I'd want to talk about. One is within the dairy sector, we talk a lot about the circular economy, and one of the panelists mentioned it here earlier. So when you got up this morning and you drank your orange juice, did you wonder what happened to the peel? When you sat down last night and had a glass of beer, did you wonder what happened to the grain that was left over after your beer was made? When you ate some almonds, did you wonder what happened to the hull that the almond had been in? All of those things are fed to dairy cattle and converted into high-quality proteins that we as humans can consume. So one of the things that we have been working on is how do we get more of this byproduct from human food systems back into the animal food chain. So that's one area. The second area is a very good friend of mine, Professor Bob Thompson, in the US, would admonish me in a meeting like this. He would say, you cannot have food security until you have economic security. And I go to a comment Pascal made earlier today about teaching men to fish rather than giving them fish. And in the dairy sector, we are actively involved with a lot of our cooperative members in programs in developing countries to help them improve the quality of their dairying to lift the boat for everyone. So a rising tide raises all boats. If we can improve the yields, improve the quality, improve the economic conditions of those farms, everyone benefits. So that's the second area I'd focus on.
Thank you very much. Andrea?
Sì, io lo dico in italiano. La prima, l'ho già detto, educazione alimentare. Davvero importante insegnare a partire dalle generazioni più giovani il valore del cibo, cibo e salute personale, cibo e salute più generale, ambiente. Questo non l'abbiamo chiaro nelle nuove generazioni, forse nelle nostre diversamente giovani, ma c'è qualcosa che è successo. In Italia, faccio questo caso per chi non è del nostro paese, si insegnava l'economia domestica a scuola, femminili, medie, fino al 1963, poi è stata sostituita dall'educazione tecnica. È come se in questi 50 anni nel nostro DNA si fosse perso qualcosa e credo che si sia davvero perso. La seconda, non ne ho parlato, soltanto un flash, ricerca, innovazione, trasferimento tecnologico, non soltanto nei paesi in via di sviluppo dove le perdite sono consistenti per queste ragioni, ma anche nei nostri, ed è importante perché davvero le tecnologie, anche quelle digitali, ci possono aiutare molto.
Grazie. Justin.
I would have two proposals, which will probably make me unpopular with Donald and the food industry. The first is that I would urge governments around the world to legislate to force food companies to prioritize food donation to charity over other means of disposal of food. And the second is a proposal to individuals that they go to their local food retailer, their food shop, and ask them what they're doing with their food surplus and why they aren't giving it to charity.
So thank you very much. It's not the time for conclusion as you have this recommendation. With this recommendation, probably the world could be a little bit more solidarity, built around solidarity, probably better access to goods, and I think that we have all the tools to provide for ourselves a synthesis of this wealth of indication, information, and achievements that have been present around this panel. Thank you very much to all of you.